Okay, everyone. I want to now delve into my trial and Don Shipley. You're going to find out that the two can't necessarily be separated, so that's why I'm going to talk about them both at the same time. To do that, we have to go back to my original trial, and I need to explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. First of all, in my original video, I did everything that I could to not bring Janela in, my ex-wife's sister, my ex-sister-in-law, the person that I was court-martialed for molesting. I did everything I could to not bring her into it and to keep her out of it. And she got drug into it and did a lot on her own to participate in it. So what I want everybody to understand is I need to add a few details from above and beyond what I've already said in my videos. And I think everybody will kind of understand why it's necessarily important. That being said, I'm going to leave out every detail that doesn't need to be talked about. And I do that because Jenna, even though she's 33 years old, she has a husband and a family, and I want to protect that as best I can. I don't want her to be a part of this. I don't want her to get in the middle of it. It's going to be up to her. Now, with that being said, I am going to make a video of all the details and every detail that is out there. But it's not going to be published unless it needs to be to clear the record. If everybody's okay with the fact that, this is as far as it goes, this is as far as it'll go. Okay, so, well, I guess I have to start out kind of in the beginning and how it all started, because that's kind of where the confusion starts. Since Don Shipley made a huge deal out of bringing the age that Jenna was when things started, I kind of want to explain to everybody exactly what happened in that. In spring of '93, my wife and I were in town for her grandfather's funeral. And even though the record at my court-martial says something else, what really happened when Janna was 12 and how this all started is much, much different. And I'm just going to kind of lay it out without too many details and let it sit on what it is. The way that the sexual molestation, quote-unquote, started was me walking in on Jen by accident, masturbating in our bed, in my bed. It wasn't anything intended, wasn't a big deal. But you need to understand two things. Jenna's family is devout Mormon. And Mormons believe that masturbation is bad. It's horrible. And if you do it, you need to confess to the bishop and, have, some pretty awful things happen. And I had a incident when I was 12, when I got caught masturbating, that influenced what I wanted to, how I wanted to handle this whole thing. And so there was also, some very quirky thing about the way she was doing it that I couldn't figure out, and then I did, but I'm not going to talk about it. It's just a detail that doesn't need to be gotten into. Okay, so I accidentally walk in on her. It's obvious what's going on. She's mortified and scared because she doesn't want to have to tell her family and go talk to the bishop and go through all the crap. So I decided that I was just gonna, be the better person, and, I told her it's no big deal. And everybody does it. Even though the church doesn't tell you that, that's the fact. Everybody does it. So, don't worry about it. And she asked a lot of questions, and I did my best to answer those questions. One of those questions, or one of those statements, I guess, was she kind of told me that she was, I was the object of, a good majority of her fantasy material that she used. And, how do you respond to that, really? Okay, great, you gotta realize that, I went from being the skinny kind of dork that, married her sister to, with all the training, going from skinny dork to kind of, chest, shoulders, six-pack abs transformation. So I just, kind of brushed it off and said, makes sense, no big deal. And that is where it started. So if everybody wants to know how it started, that's how it started. When everybody wants to know what happened when she was 12 years old, that's what happened. Now, I know that's not the story everybody's been told, but that's okay because I'm going to be able to explain that. But just understand that there was a big secret that Jenilyn wasn't telling at the time, that she didn't tell me at the time, and it was significant. It was something that I needed to understand to give her good advice. So without knowing this big secret, I was advising her, on the fact that, I was 12 when I discovered my sexuality, and, I tested and experimented with my sexuality with other people, 14, 15, 16 years old. And by the time I was 16 years old, I had a lot of intercourse. And that is just what it is. So I was just going on my past experience and trying to help her through something that was very awkward for me, not knowing that the religious part of it wasn't exactly what the religion tells you. You grow up and you figure out the things that you were raised to believe in church, not exactly the way it is. So that's what it is. After that, Jenilyn began coming to our place in San Diego for her summer breaks. And, that is what it is. She came down and babysat for our kids. The vast majority of the time I was deployed, so I wasn't around very much. And this happened every summer for 93, 94, 95, 93, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So realize that, now that I become kind of her trusted confidant in sexual things, she asked a lot of questions. I answered the questions as best I could. And, it grew from there. Does everybody want to know the details? Okay. Inappropriate touching, probably when she was 14 years old. The oral sex, or what people need to know, the military calls sodomy. In the military, oral sex is sodomy, and adultery is illegal. Those are kind of two biggies that you got to understand. So if you read the charge of sodomy, it's not the, forcible anal, it's oral sex. And then the intercourse was when she was 16, just like I said. And I'm not going to justify that. I'm not going to tell anybody that I wasn't wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong on so many levels, and I have always accepted responsibility for my piece of what happened. And I want everybody to know that I'm not justifying my behavior. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible, and I shouldn't have done it, and I should have used better judgment. I should have made better choices, and I didn't. And that's on me. So I take that. But there's things that have to do with this that aren't on me, and that's what really needs to be explained. And we'll pick that up on the end of the summer in '97. We were back in Utah at my ex-wife's family's, and I'm taking Janelyn somewhere, I don't remember exactly, and she's visibly upset, and so I kind of prod her, and what's going on, tell me, talk to me, what's going on. And she lays a revelation on me that I was not expecting. She told me that when she was 8, she was playing doctor, you show me yours, I'll show you mine, with an extended member family that was the same age as her. And another extended family member caught them doing that, and then leveraged that against them so that this person could sexually abuse and not get caught. Now, this extended family member was well known that he had also molested another of his children, and to a lesser degree, my ex-wife. And I was really upset. I was really angry when I found out. And I think what happened, or what I believe happened, is that Janelyn thought I was angry at her. And I wasn't. I was angry at myself. I was angry at this extended family member. But she took it as I was angry at her. And she probably felt pretty betrayed by the whole thing, too. Anyways, I kind of exploded and told her she needed to tell. And she, says, well, if I tell, then I have to tell about you, too. And I told her, that's what you have to do. Go. You've got to do this. You've got to tell. That was a bad move. She was probably looking at me, to me, for advice. And, I can see now, hindsight being 20/20, she has this one side of her life where she has to do things. She's being blackmailed into doing sexual things that she has no choice over. And then she has this other side of her life where she gets to choose. And that gets to choose was compensating for the doesn't get to choose. And what I did kind of shredded that. And she was very angry and probably very, very hurt by what I did. Needless to say, we go back to San Diego. A couple weeks go by. I'm coming back home from deployment, and the bomb drops. And I find out that she had in fact told, and I was in some pretty serious trouble. What I didn't know at the time is she didn't tell about the extended family member. She just told about me. And that, really affected things because, when I did my fall on my sword confession and talked to NCIS, I told the truth. And the way things played out was very confusing after that because I didn't think that they were going to be able to detach these two things. But how it worked out, I think, was that the supposed abuse of this extended family member wasn't being corroborated, and realistically, the military really just kind of wanted to focus on me. This was still during the time when, I was a little pissed off about what I had to do for a living. And realistically, all they wanted was, to have leverage against me. So that played out over the course of weeks, and, I had an attorney, and that's the way it went. The first part, you got to understand, we're talking about a court-martial, a military court-martial. So we're talking about military law or martial law. I think everybody understands that. The saying in the military is, in a court-martial, you're guilty till proven innocent. And, I knew I was guilty. So we went through the process. And the process in a court-martial is a little different from what a civilian court is like. And then the way you make a deal for court-martial is the first thing you do is negotiate the punishment. And over the course of weeks, the punishment that was negotiated was 66 months in military prison, forfeiture of pay and benefits, dishonorable discharge. After that step, then they tell you, they figure out what they're going to charge you with, which was a little odd. But it's significant because when the charges finally came down, it's what everybody sees. DUI, carnal knowledge of a minor under 16, sodomy with a minor under 16, oral sex, and indecent touching. And I was a little flipped by that because, I've told my story and it doesn't even come close to jiving with what the charges say. And basically, at this point, I was told, well, if you want these charges changed, they're going to take the deal away. And realized I was facing 47 years in prison max. I wasn't willing to sacrifice anything because I did know that on the other side of it, the punishment, it wasn't going to be like a real punishment. And so I just kind of accepted, okay, whatever. I'll say what I got to say to get my 66-month deal. Because I knew that 66 months actually meant 36 months in prison and then parole probation. And, it wasn't what it was. So I agreed to it. Fine. Well, then I figure out the last part of how this has to play out is I find out that I have to convince a judge that I did what I just said I did. And I told him, I was like, this is, how do I convince somebody of things that I know I didn't do? Well, again, if you change your story, they're going to take away the deal. Okay, so how do I know what to say? Well, they give me all the discovery evidence. I get to read Jen Lynn's statement. I get to hear all the interviews. I get to read the NCIS report. I get to read the local cop report. So that's what I use to prove to the judge at the court-martial that I, in fact, did what I said I did. Well, that was, at my court-martial, that's what happened. And the judge accepted that, everything that I said I did. And then we move on to the sentencing portion. That's when they called Jen Lynn to testify. And I was a little freaked out because Jen Lynn didn't tell the same story that I just told. She said that she was abused from the spring of '93 to the summer of '95. And that was kind of a significant deviation on what I admitted to, which is the summer of '93 to the summer of '96. Well, they just rolled right by it. Major discrepancy really didn't, slow the whole process down at all. And so, go through the court-martial, get sentenced to 11 years, but I had my pretrial agreement, so I couldn't get more than 66 months. And that was it. I went to the brig, and, you guys pretty much know the story from there. But now we're moving into kind of the modern day, where after I was arrested for my trial for failure to register as a sex offender, that was very interesting. And let me just point out some of the, ways I knew I was going to get screwed no matter what. On the prosecution side, they have two attorneys. One is a seasoned assistant DA, and the other one is kind of like a contract Canyon County prosecutor. Now, between them, they probably have like 20, 30 years of trial experience. My attorney, my first attorney was a deal maker, and I wasn't making a deal because it's, I knew really what I was doing was the misdirection, and I needed to keep it up, and taking the deal wouldn't do that. So, I fired the deal maker, and then they give me another attorney, and that attorney, turns out, had never had a federal jury trial in her career. Now, this is a very interesting point because if you guys happen to read the transcripts of the hearing where I'm dismissing my first attorney, you're going to hear Judge Windmill talk about how wonderful these CJA attorneys are and how they have to meet a minimum requirement, and they're good attorneys. Well, good attorneys with no experience up against two attorneys with mountains of experience, I was cooked. I was burnt. I knew I was screwed. And it got worse from there. At my trial, my attorney didn't call the other 4 witnesses that we planned to call and the 2 rebuttal witnesses that we wanted to call. And I got crucified. It was bad. It was horrible. They got the AG from Nevada to come and state unequivocally that everything I said was not the way it was, and it was a total lie, and these Nevada laws that I wasn't understanding were ruled to be constitutional, and everything was fine. But that isn't actually the case. The laws that I was talking about in Nevada have never ever gone into effect, and they're now at the state Supreme Court level, holding in a pattern for the legislature to change the laws to something that is constitutional. And that never came up in my trial. The other states that had made decisions that said this is unconstitutional, that you are in fact punishing somebody above and beyond what they were sentenced to, it's called ex post facto, that this is becoming more and more real. And this was always my argument. The original sex offender registration law didn't apply to me because I was a court-martial conviction, and at the time, court-martial convictions weren't subject to the registration system. That happened sometime after my conviction. But the new law, the 2006 Adam Walsh Act, dragged me into the registration system, and I fought and I fought and I fought and said, this is punishment, not prevention. And, a lot of legal stuff aside, that's the way it was. So I'm found guilty. It is what it is. I always got into it knowing that I was probably going to do 2.5 years in prison, and that's just, it worked out that way. But I kept doing what I was really wanting to do, and kept the heat up, and was burning as many resources as I could to continue this process throughout my sentencing process. So I asked for a hearing to ask to be released until I was sentenced. And that was a pretty interesting thing. And I'm going to tell you about it because that's where Shipley gets all of his information. So I'm brought into this hearing, and my attorney tells me in no unequivocal terms that if I change my testimony from what I testified to in my court-martial, I was going to be brought up on charges of perjury. And because that would be my third felony, I would be charged as a habitual offender, and I would be facing 25 to life. So there's no way I'm going to go down that road. And, so I did what I had to do. I told the same story that I told at my court-martial that wasn't the truth. And that's, what happened. Now, there's some details that Don Shipley leaves out. Number one, he doesn't play the whole audio of that hearing, and he doesn't put out the full transcript. And there's a really, really good reason for that. Because the first thing you hear at this hearing is the Judge Bush, states unequivocally that he and the prosecutor had met in private and had a meeting. And the judge forgave himself and the prosecutor for doing that. That was the first part. So, I'm looking over at my attorney going, hell yeah, you need to object. You need to say something right now. And she didn't. So, I'm livid, but I get on the stand and I start testifying. The next thing that you don't hear that Shipley didn't release is that I was going to be working with GAP, the Government Accountability Project, to corroborate some news stories that had come out very recently about the use of double strikes with drones. And the fact that I talked about double strikes almost a year before this ever came up, a couple of years if you see some of the documentation that I did in my legal doings in Las Vegas. And, I thought it was necessarily important to say, hey, these double strikes have been going on since the early 90s. And this is a big deal. And the fact that we're doing it again with drones further backs up my claims of what I said. He doesn't play you that part because he doesn't want you to hear that either. He only plays the part when Peters gets up and starts interrogating me over, how old was she, everything. Everything that you heard was straight out of my court-martial. It was what I had to say to make it so I didn't get charged and go away for 25 to life. So if that upsets anybody, I'm sorry, but that's the way it had to be. But before the hearing, I also talked to my attorney, and I told her, if he goes down that road, I need you to rebut and ask me some questions that I can answer. And before we get to that, I do want to add one thing. When Peters asked me the question about the Pentagon bombing, that was something I could answer because me being a weapons specialist and, having training in bomb damage assessment, I could, there was no reason that I couldn't talk about that. So when I started talking about that, that was his last question. No further questions. So I look over at my attorney and I'm waiting for these questions like, did you ever leave the Miramar Brig during your incarceration? Yes. How many times? Dozens. So many I can't remember. Did you ever fly on an aircraft during that time? Helicopter, jet, anything? I could answer yes to that. That's not part of my confidentiality agreement. And things that I could talk about that I could not get in trouble for and not be brought up on perjury charges. Now, the thing is this meeting between the judge and the prosecutor that happened beforehand, I've seen shades of that with the Susan Lindauer's case, among one of many, where the prosecutor basically, discloses the existence of a confidentiality agreement. And, tells the judge if he abuses the terms of that confidentiality agreement, this is, something that I'm going to use. And it's amazing because that meeting is totally against the rules. If you want to know how against the rules, get the transcript of my first sentencing hearing. And Judge Windmill talks about these, secret meetings that just aren't allowed, and it would be just horrible to, do, and he would never allow that, and blah, 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 blah. But, I found that interesting while he was saying that it actually did happen to me at my pre-sentencing release hearing. So after the pre-sentence release hearing, I heard about what Don Shipley did, and he got, the audio transcripts and the written transcripts and put them on the internet and put up a whole bunch of videos, and it was horrible. And I found that very interesting because another detail that nobody knows is that when I, as the defendant, tried to get those audio transcripts, I was told that they don't exist by the clerk of the court. And I was told that multiple times. So when I finally got out and confronted the clerk of the court with the fact that I could prove that the audio transcripts do exist, I still wasn't allowed to get them. And I find that very interesting because if Don Shipley can get access to materials that the clerk of the court either lied about or realistically thought that they didn't have, how is Don Shipley affecting my trial? How am I getting a fair trial if Don Shipley is dictating the terms of it behind the scenes through the prosecutor? Now, those audio transcripts, if the clerk of the court didn't give them to him, then it had to be the prosecutor or the judge. Now, the prosecutor couldn't do it on his own, so he probably would have had to go through the judge to get these audio transcripts and then gives them to Don Shipley. Now, everybody should understand at this point that it's very clear that the crime that I'm being charged for and punished for was not why I was being punished. It's very clear that I was being punished for running my mouth and talking about things that I shouldn't be talking about, and this is pure revenge. And so, when I knew all these things were happening, what could I do? I couldn't do anything. I just had to accept it and move on. And, accept that the greater good of the manipulation of, the misdirection of what I was trying to do was working out absolutely wonderfully. But if anybody really wants to hear something, this is where it gets important. At my first sentencing hearing, I was provided with a victim impact statement. Now, that seems a little unusual, that there's a victim of my not registering. Doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it. But I was given a victim impact letter that Janelyn had written. And that letter is very important, and I'm just going to get it out because it says something that I just couldn't believe. Now, here's the letter. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that this is sealed, but since I spoke about it in my sentencing, I can go back to quoting it. And there's a very interesting part about this that I keyed in on very quickly. And that statement is, after the 7 years of constant abuse, I was able to succeed as a young adult. 7 years? Are you kidding? We just went through a whole trial where it was very clear that it was 3 years. Never a question. 3 years. So I threw it out. I says, how could this be the case? If she was abused for 7 years, that couldn't be me. That had to be somebody else. Now, I don't know if Janelyn did this consciously or if it was a Freudian slip, but now we're not talking about just what I did. We're finally talking about the primary offender in her life, the person that never was held accountable, and I wanted I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to show somebody that this is wrong. And when I did bring it up, again, everybody just blew by it. 7 years, 3 years, it's no big deal. It happens. But this is the first time I have had any evidence that somebody else abused Janet Lynn. And that abuse lasted for 7 years. And the abuse, I'm guessing, probably stopped because this extended family member wouldn't touch Janet Lynn with a stick after everything that I was going through. So, back then I took a little solace in knowing that, at least this extended family member wouldn't hurt her anymore. But I'm absolutely livid at my trial because now it's a little bit more obvious what's going on. And Janet Lynn's parents were in the courtroom. And when I spoke, and you guys can just read the transcripts, when I said what I said, the look on their faces told me the whole story. That they knew. They knew and they did nothing. And this person is still out there. Whole new generation of kids to go after. And this is the big family secret. This is the big skeleton. And nobody cares. So I'm, a little upset. Don Shipley comes out and paints me as the lying pedophile. Well, there's two things that I know about those statements. One, I'm not a pedophile. And I know that. Pedophiles are people who are only aroused to children. I know that that is not the case with me. So, it's just a word that he's using to impact people because it's a very impactful word. And when you can use the word pedophile and equate it to me, that stings. The other word that he uses to describe me is a liar. And yes, I did lie. And I did tell the same lie that I told at my court-martial that I did at my pre-sentence release hearing. Everybody understands that when somebody is blackmailing you into saying something that they want you to say, you don't hold responsible a captured POW who is forced to, say bad things about his country. So why should it be any different for me? Well, that's the problem with what Don Shipley's doing. Because when he states that he knows I wasn't a Navy SEAL, okay, there's two things about that. One, he is technically correct. Having the exact same training as somebody that is a Navy SEAL doesn't make you a Navy SEAL. And I kind of explained that in my first video. Yes, I had the same training as Navy SEALs, but I was never a Navy SEAL. I was never designated a SEAL. The training was part of a special mission that kept us safe and made it so we could do our job. Clearly. The other thing that he unequivocally states is that there was never a SEAL Team 9. That is also technically true. As true as when SEAL Team 6 came into existence after the Osama bin Laden raid, before that, and technically still now, is DevGru 1. Development Group 1. There is no SEAL Team 6. There is no SEAL Team 9. And I stated that in my first video too. It was a tongue-in-cheek goof. That there was these people whose primary job was to control cruise missiles, and, you know, our moniker designation was the Nines. Not SEAL Team 9, Nines. Was it a goof that, you know, there's this obvious gap between 8 and 10? Yeah, but that's what it was. So technically, everything Shipley's saying is technically the truth. But here's where he loses, is he has no direct knowledge of any training that I've had. None whatsoever. But when you talk, everybody remembers right after my video, a real Navy SEAL, there was an instructor, a BUDS instructor, during the time that I did my training, came out and said, hey, I think I remember this guy. And, you know, he really stuck to his guns for a little while. And, you know, we were talking. And, you know, before he ever came out publicly, I told him, you know, you don't want any part of what I'm doing. They are going to crucify you. You shouldn't get involved. And he says, I want to get involved. So Michael Jacko posts on his Facebook, this guy's for real. He got obliterated. Don Shipley, he himself called Jacko's wife, Tracy Joe, and threatened her directly. When you threaten a man's family, his safety, his job, he's going to tell you what he has to tell you to get you off his back. And it seems interesting that Don Shipley, the fake Navy SEAL finder-outer guy, when he gets any information that corroborates what somebody's saying, he obliterates it. He goes after it, he attacks it, he destroys it. So I think it's very interesting that Don Shipley can be out there being the fake Navy SEAL prover guy and eliminate any evidence to what really happened. Now, interestingly enough, there's a second person that has direct knowledge of what was going on during that time. And that other person that I have very much talked about was Eric Prince, CEO of Blackwater. You know, everybody knows. Everybody knows that I am not a fan of Eric Prince. I condemn him on every level for what he's done. But interestingly enough, he wrote a book. And in that book, he doesn't really talk about his training too much. Not a lot of details. But he gives a very interesting detail that in context doesn't make a lot of sense. He states unequivocally that when he went through Hell Week, his class did Hell Week on San Clemente Island, not where they usually do Hell Week on the Strand. And the reason that he gave was that the bacteria levels in the water were too high. Now, I don't know why Eric Prince brought this up, but I think it's significant to show people that while Class 188 was doing Hell Week over on San Clemente Island, the Strand was deserted and could have very easily have been used by a single boat crew with a single instructor. And again, not directly corroborating, but something that, makes you scratch your head and go, that's weird. The third thing that has come out since is Jeremy Scahill. He wrote a book called Dirty Wars. And in the very beginning, he's talking with the SOCOM commander, Special Operations Commander. And I remember a quote that this commander gives to Scahill. And, when I read it, I was like, holy crap. Now, I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have my reference material, but basically what he said is, how cool it was that you could fly in for 10 miles away, go down the chimney, and disappear like ghosts. The other thing that he said is that in the 90s, the way to deal with things was with cruise missiles. They didn't want boots on the ground. They didn't want Navy SEALs. They wanted to use cruise missiles. Well, nobody would understand what he said better than me. Flying in from 10 miles away. Two very easy way to do it. A hey-ho jump, high altitude, high open. Or what, I personally more enjoyed was a wingsuit. And we could fly 10 miles. Free fall. Going down the chimney. That's kind of an obscure statement. We ain't Santa Claus. So what was he trying to say with that? Well, what I can tell you is that going down the chimney, or putting it down the chimney, was one way of using a Tomahawk missile to attack a target. And what you would do is you would overfly the target and mark it. And then you would execute something close to an Emmelman turn. You would bank up and over, and as you were coming straight down at the target, straight down at the roof, you line it up, and you drive that missile straight through the roof to the ground floor, and it detonates and blows up the building with the least amount of collateral damage. That was one way that became doctrine, and it was called putting it down the chimney. The other one is one that everybody's familiar with. That was the Pentagon attack, where you overfly the target, but you want to hit a certain place on the side of the building. So you overfly the target, do a descending, decreasing radius turn, and line up and hit the target exactly where you wanted to. And I think that people that have done their research know that the lawn where the Pentagon was hit had a significant mark on it. And that lawn was cleaned up right after the attack was over. So, very, very interesting things that, people should need to know before they denounce me as the lying pedophile. The last thing that SOCOM commander said was disappear like ghosts. And that is also significant because some of the special training that we had was to become quote-unquote ghost walkers. Somebody that can come in and leave and never be found out, never have a trace of their existence. It was critical to our mission. That nobody knows that we're sneaking in, delivering a cruise missile, and getting out without anybody ever knowing or finding us. So I think all of those things are significant. You couple that with the research that Jeremy Scahill did in his book. You read about the way drones are used and the the just disgusting ways that they do it. He comes to a climax of a 16-year-old American boy in Yemen was killed in a drone attack because of who his father was. And the military plays it off as we didn't mean to kill him, we were trying to kill this guy. But, it doesn't matter. They're having the same problems now with drones that I was having back then with cruise missiles. And these are the things that nobody wants anybody to find out, because my story fills in the blanks and gives people the information that they don't want anybody to have. So I understand why Don Shipley does the things that he does. It's his job. Quite literally, it's his job. Whether he knows the truth or doesn't know the truth, he is telling the story that the military wants everybody to hear. And I accept that. But what I don't accept is how he can justify what he does while crucifying me for hurting a child. Because I don't know if Don Shipley is aware that what he is doing is causing significant harm that he does not think about, that he puts out of his mind. And, I'm going to say this unequivocally. I get why he does the whole, go after fake Navy SEALs. But he doesn't just go after fake Navy SEALs. He goes after real Navy SEALs that say something that he doesn't like. And he is more than willing to crucify a real Navy SEAL just as fast as he is to crucify a fake Navy SEAL. And we know this. Michael Jacko knows this. His wife knows this. Every SEAL member knows this. But that breaks the code. Don Shipley knows that you do not do those things to a brother, to a fellow SEAL team member. But he did it. He went after Tracy Jo. He verbally threatened her. He made a video that paints Michael Jacko and I as having a homosexual love affair, which I just need to say, Don Shipley, you look at Michael Jacko and his wife, Tracy Jo, stone cold fox. You look at me, my wife, Eva, my ex, Holly, and a lot of stuff that I had on my Facebook when Don Shipley found me out is pretty significant proof that we're, doing okay in the heterosexual community. But what I find very interesting is that he's making this video sitting next to a dude on a Friday night talking about how gay I am and how gay Michael Jacko is. Well, if you know me and you know who I am, you know that my second oldest son is homosexual. And beyond homosexual, he's really, really homosexual. He dresses up as a girl, 50s pinup model, and I couldn't be prouder of him. I love him for being himself. But I do not go well with homo bashing, because my son's homosexual. So when Don Shipley, tries to beat somebody up over being homosexual, while he's spending Friday night with his boyfriend making a video, a boy, that's a friend, how can you sit there and say, I'm gay or Michael Jacko's gay, when, seriously, look at yourselves. I always thought it was really funny. I think, when I first saw the video, I was like, you two should just make out and get it over with. Because when you got to spend that much time and that much energy bashing a fellow brother, a Navy SEAL, that there is no dispute that that's what he is, for saying that he thinks that he might remember me. Obviously, Don Shipley is a secret keeper, and they use him to keep the secrets of the special operations world, and he's very good at it, and that's what he does, and that's fine. But I think people really need to pay attention that Don Shipley is just an attack dog. He doesn't have first-hand knowledge. The first-hand knowledge in my case actually kind of leans towards I'm saying something that's real, but in the end, it's all good. Because in the end, what really was going on, what I was really trying to accomplish, my operation was using Don Shipley as an asset to consume as much of the intelligence assets and resources as I could to get them focused on me, so they couldn't focus anywhere else. And understand that worked 10 times better than anybody could have ever imagined. Don Shipley got worked. And, I'm okay with that. What he did helped what I was doing, my operation, out immensely. I mean, couldn't have gone better. And so, I think what everybody needs to understand is what was really going on was me working Don Shipley to get what I wanted out of him. Now, I'm going to end this little segment of the video by saying, Janelyn, I need you to understand something. I am doing this for the greater good. We have some serious problems in the world that nobody's dealing with, but me and my people. And us doing a good job means that your children and your grandchildren aren't going to have to deal with the mess that things are. Because currently, what's being left to the children and grandchildren of America right now is $18+ trillion of debt and a corporation system that controls government and turns us all into debt slaves. And I need you to understand that this is what I'm worried about. This is what I'm trying to do. I am asking you to exercise your choosing, to stay out of this. Let me and mine do what we got to do to fix things. You got used the first time at the court-martial. You got used again at my trial. And you let something slip, consciously or unconsciously, that I know is the truth, and your family knows is the truth. And that the elephant in the living room is that an extended member of your family is a monster that has been protected by blaming me for everything that he did. I wish I would have known what was going on with you in the beginning. I wish I would have known what he was using against you in the beginning. But I didn't, and I will be infinitely sorry for that forever. But I am trying to atone, to give myself to a cause that is more important than any other thing in the history of humanity. And we turn this corner and nobody cares. So I'm asking you, I'm begging you, don't let them drag you into this again. This is the last you'll ever see of me. I am going to, document all the details, but those details will never, ever come out unless they have to. Anybody who tries to drag you in this, you give them a no comment, go on with your life, take care of your husband and your kids, and don't worry about it. Nobody's going to fault you. Everybody's going to understand why you made the decisions that you did. You were a kid, 16 years old, having to choose what you had to deal with. And that shouldn't have been put on you. And I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. Stay out of this. Don't worry about this. And live your life. And I'll make you a deal. You do that. And we're going to be in the background creating a better world for your children and your grandchildren. And that's all I can do. Now, Don Shipley. All I've got to say to you is that I did everything that I did to get out of you what I wanted. And you got worked. And you got worked bad. Now, it's all happening again. And I'm telling you right now that I'm making this video and saying these things for a reason. Now, what you need to say, what you need to ask yourself is, am I going to do exactly what I did the first time and do exactly what they want me to do? That's it. Because I can tell you unequivocally, the only thing that you can do that trumps our plan is to do nothing. And nobody thinks you're going to do that. So whatever you do in response to these videos, realize one thing. It is exactly what we want done. And if you haven't learned that lesson yet, we'll give you another one.